Hello, right, we're going to have a look at English Language Paper 1, question 4. The first thing to have a look at is where this fits in the context of the whole paper. So we've done some sort of shorter, lower tariff mark questions, and then we get this larger question of question 4, which is 20 marks, a quarter of your overall marks from the paper, and a question that you need to be spending considerably more time on. So you're looking to about 25 minutes on this question. So this is more of a mini essay than the shorter sort of 1 paragraph, 2 paragraph responses you might have been writing earlier on in the paper. This is an evaluation question, that's what AQA call it, and what we mean by evaluation is that process of making a judgment and having an opinion about something. You need to be able to look at the extract and work out which quotes it is that are helping you come to the particular opinion that you've come to, but also how the writers use language to make you come to that conclusion. So it's sort of an AO1 and AO2. If we've got our literature hat on, it's covering both of those skills. So it's having a personal, informed and supported opinion, but also being able to think about how the writers use language to make you think whatever it is that you think. Okay, so here's our question. Focus this part of your answer on the second half of the source from line 16 to the end. It is always specific line numbers and typically the last half-ish of the extract. In my exam, I'm going to section that off. I don't want to be writing about anything from the wrong section because that's going to decrease my mark, and obviously I don't want that. At this point, I've already answered questions 1, 2 and 3, so I know this extract fairly well. So I'm coming to this statement and I'm already going to kind of immediately have some ideas. I'm obviously going to then go back through the extract and scan through for specifics. But this statement makes a little bit more sense when you've already read it. So our statement for this extract: a student having read this section of the text said, the writer vividly conveys the horror of the situation. It makes you feel sad about the boy in the basket and the man who held on. So 2 very separate statements there. We're dealing with the idea of something that's horrific and upsetting, and then also this idea that we feel sympathy for the boy and the man who holds on. At this point we don't know what that means, but in your real exam you would, because you'd have read it. To what extent do you agree? So it's always about the scale of your agreeance, not just do you agree, do you disagree. We're looking for some subtlety. We might mostly agree or kind of mostly disagree or partly disagree or what have you. In your response you should write about your own impressions of what the narrator sees. So this is your personal opinion. We don't have a kind of an idea in advance that we want you to agree or to disagree. We're interested in what you think. The examiner wants to know your genuine opinion. Evaluate how the writer has created these impressions. Whenever we see AQA use the word how, they mean how has the writer used language or structure to get you to think that. We're probably going to write about language. That's a lot simpler and easier to be more developed about. And then lastly, we're going to support our opinion with quotations from the text. Probably a different quote or quotations for each of our paragraphs. Okay, so as I was saying, we've got this scale that we want you to be kind of thinking about when you're looking at the statements. And we would advise that for at least one of the 2 statements, you decide to not fully agree or fully disagree, because that's going to allow you to have a more developed response to it, because you're going to be saying, well, I partly agree and these are the reasons why I partly agree, but there's a little bit of me that disagrees and this is the reason why I feel that way. And all of a sudden that paragraph is so much more developed and explained, and that hopefully is going to see an improvement on your mark. Okay, so how do we structure this? So we've said it's a mini essay, we've talked about the skills we're going to demonstrate. This is how I would advise that you structure this response. So your first paragraph, you're going to write about the first part of the statement. You're going to use a quote or a series of short little quotations, and you're going to explain in as much detail whether or not you agree or disagree with that statement. We're looking for the use of the word because to show that explanation, and just you to really try and think, what do I think or feel, and why do I think or feel that? We're not analysing language. This is very much an AO1. If we were thinking about it in terms of literature, it's very much an AO1 skill that we're demonstrating. The second paragraph, you're going to choose one quote, and it can be from any of the correct part of the source, and you're just going to analyse the writer's use of language, trying to link back to the statement. So you're going to think of it as a TQI paragraph, so there's going to be some subject terminology, words like simile, metaphor, adjective. You're going to write in the quote, and you're going to say as many different comments on effect as you possibly can. And then for paragraphs 3 and 4, we're doing exactly the same, but for the second part of the statement. I would really advise that you're using different quotes for each of your paragraphs if you can, just to show that you're really engaging with the full text rather than just sticking with 1 or 2 quotes. Okay, so the extract that we're looking at today is taken from a novel called Enduring Love by Ian McEwan, and this is from the very, very start of the novel. And in this novel, the narrator and some other men are trying to stop a hot air balloon from flying off. So in the basket is a terrified boy who is alone. He's entirely on his own, and there are some men on a sort of an open space like a field, and they realise that the boy is in the basket, and they're trying desperately to hold on to stop the balloon from flying away. And that's kind of where we drop into the extract. Now, language, the time is difficult. I don't think the actual things they're asking you to do are particularly challenging. Very much things that we're capable of doing, but it's the time that's difficult. And as a result, I would always advise that you're actively reading. So we've split the 2 statements up. We've got the horror of the situation and this idea of feeling sad about the boy and the man who holds on. And what I would be really advising in your exam is that you do exactly the same. You've got your 2 highlighters, and as you're going through, you're looking for quotes that could help you either agree or disagree with the 2 statements. If you can only do one at a time, that's fine, but you're going to need to go fairly quickly, skimming and scanning through the response, bearing in mind that you've already read it well several times at this point. So you're not going to spend a huge amount of time needing to really process it, but you're going to have to spend a little bit of time thinking, okay, which quotes do I want to use, which ones are going to back up my opinion effectively. You've got this extract in your booklet, but I'll read it to you in case you don't have it in front of you. The active reading starts at line 16, which is on the next slide, but obviously we need to understand the whole picture in order to be able to answer the question suitably. So I'll read through this, and then we'll have a look at how we could address the question in this extract. A mighty fist of wind socked the balloon in 2 rapid blows, 1-2, the second more vicious than the first. It jerked Gad right out of the basket onto the ground, and with Gad's considerable weight removed from the equation, it lifted the balloon 5 feet or so straight into the air. The rope ran through my grip, scorching my palms, but I managed to keep hold, with 2 feet of spare line. The others kept hold too. The basket was right above our heads now, and we stood with arms upraised like Sunday bell ringers into our amazed silence before the shouting could resume. The second punch came and knocked the balloon up and westwards. Suddenly, we were treading the air with all our weight in the grip of our fists. Almost simultaneous with the desire to stay on the rope and save the boy came other thoughts, thoughts of self-preservation and fear. We were rising, and the ground was dropping away as the balloon was punched upwards. I knew I had to get my legs and feet locked around the rope, but the end of the line barely reached below my waist, and my grip was slipping. My legs flailed in the empty air. Every fraction of a second that passed increased the drop, and the point must come when to let go would be impossible or fatal. Then someone did let go. Immediately the balloon and its hangers-on lurched upwards another several feet. But letting go was in our nature too. The child was not my child, and I was not going to die for it. Then I glimpsed another body fall away, and I felt the balloon lurch upwards. The matter was settled. Altruism had no place. Being good made no sense. I let go and fell, I reckon about 12 feet. I landed heavily on my side. I got away with a bruised thigh. Around me, before or after, I'm not so sure, bodies were thumping into the ground. By the time I got to my feet, the balloon was 50 yards away, and one man was still dangling by his rope, all his energies concentrated in his weakening grip. He was already a tiny figure, and as the balloon and its basket lifted away and westwards, the smaller he became, and the more terrible it was. Our silence was a kind of acceptance, a death warrant, or it was horrified shame. He'd been on the rope so long that I began to think he might stay there until the balloon drifted down. But even as I had that hope, we saw him slip down right to the end of the rope. And yet he hung there for 2 seconds, 3, 4, and then he let ruthless gravity play its part. And from somewhere, a thin squawk cut through go in the stilled air. He fell as he had hung, a stiff little black stick. I've never seen such a terrible thing as that falling man. Okay, so quite a sort of upsetting moment. The boy in the basket, several men holding onto the ropes of the hot air balloon in an attempt to keep him on the ground, and then as each person lets go, the balloon just goes higher with the boy inside, until there's just one man remaining, and then at the end of the extract that man falls from considerable height in the sky, and then that's the end. So we're going to start off by looking at the opinion parts of the response that you would do. So we're looking at paragraph 1 and paragraph 3 because they're the same skills. Remember, these are just having an informed personal opinion, thinking about how much you agree with the statements, and using quotes to back up what you're saying. We'll start off by looking at this first one. So this was the writer vividly conveys the horror of the situation. So is this something that you agree is horrible and horrific? Okay, so here's a model paragraph 1. So this is the kind of thing that we are aiming for. This is an explained response. This is going to get about a GCSE level 3, which is roughly GCSE grades 5, 6, possibly even 7, depending on grade boundaries. So this is a clearly explained response to that task. So here's the model, and you've got this in your booklet. I mostly agree with the statement, particularly about the part about the horror of the situation. So that's a really good opening sentence. It addresses the statement and it puts yourself on that scale how much you agree. This is evident where the narrator describes the man drifting upwards, still holding onto the balloon, and describing how the smaller he became and the more terrible it was. So we've taken a quote from the extract and embedded it into that line, so it just reads like it's part of it. The fact that the man is getting smaller from the perspective of the narrator gives us an indication that the man is quickly dragged high up into the sky. You can tell that all the people in the story know that the man holding on will certainly lose his life, and that him getting smaller just means that when the man unavoidably lets go, he'll definitely die. So I've just taken that quote, explained what that quote shows, what I understand about that quote, linking it back to this idea of the horror. This creates a sense of palpable tension in the extract because the people there are just passive observers waiting for the inevitable to happen and cannot help in any way, which makes the scene feel more horrific. So really clear focus on the statement, using a quote, just explained opinion. That would be about a GCSE level 3. There's only 4 levels in language, so that would be a really good place to start from. So this is the bit where you have a go. So you're going to now have a go at writing a paragraph 3. So bearing in mind what we've just looked at, that paragraph 1, it's the same. It's this opinion piece where you're writing about whether or not you would agree or disagree. You can see on the slide where it is that you should write it. So this is where you we'll just quickly talk through what you need to do and then you'll have a go at it. So here is the second part of the statement. It makes you feel sad about the boy in the basket and the man who held on. You might want to think about those two separately. You might feel different levels of sadness about the boy than you do about the man who holds on and then unfortunately lets go at the end of the extract. That's up to you. In order for this to be successful, you need to refer explicitly to the statement and how much you agree. You want to use the words the writer or find their name. His name is McEwen, that's his surname. You're going to select and include an appropriate quote, or you might want to use a series of short little quotes, and you're going to explain what that quote shows you and how that supported you in agreeing or disagreeing. And then you're going to use words that we know examiners are looking for when they're thinking about marking something as explained. A word like because or as is useful. So if you pause the video now and have a go at that paragraph. So we've now looked at paragraph 1 and paragraph 3, so the opinion ones, and now we're moving on to the language analysis. So having a look at paragraphs 2 and 4, where we select quotes from the extract or the correct part of the extract, where we feel that we can both comment on the writer's use of language but then also link back to the statements. So there's the extract that we're focusing on. What I would do now is I would probably pause this and with the extract in front of me I would scan back through and you're trying to find a minimum of 2 quotes that you think you could write about the language of. You might pick a single quote, you might choose to condense a quote by using an ellipsis in the middle, so you can take a little bit from that sentence and then a little bit from that sentence, or you might look at types of words. There might be a repeated particular type of word that you look for, but pause it now and think, right, if I was in my exam and this was my task, which 2 bits of language do I think I could write about in detail? Okay, so I've written a model paragraph 2, level 3 again, like the other paragraph was. So this is how to do an explained comment on language that we are also linking back to the statement. The author uses lots of nouns which seem to dehumanise the man holding on. The use of the figure and stick make it seem like he's not a real person because these words aren't words we'd ordinarily associate with human beings. This is possibly because the narrator feels horrified that the man will die and also guilty because of the role he has played in the man's death. Fundamentally, the narrator's decision to let go made it worse for the man holding on. The writer's choice of dehumanising nouns could suggest that his guilt is if he had held on, the man might not have died. Also, by referring to him as a stick, it emphasises how far up the man has gone and makes it clear that the fall will be fatal for him, which creates genuine horror and distress for the man holding on as he's tried to do something selfless in trying to save the child. Okay, so it's taken the idea of a type of language, the use of nouns, figure and stick, and then talked about why the writer might have picked those words, and just explaining my ideas really, really clearly, several sentences that just make it clear to the examiner that I've picked these words for this reason, and then I've made sure that a couple of times I'm referring back to the statements. I'm talking about the idea of something being horrific, or that the narrator feels horrified, and then I've talked later on at the idea of horror and distress. So I've analysed language, but I've made these references back to the statement, and that's going to get me really good marks. There's another level 3 example there. Okay, so now over to you. So I've tried to show where it'll be, so it'll be in that little box there. So you're having a go at choosing your own quote and then analysing the language. Look back at that model to help you. This is a Taqui paragraph, so in literature, in language as well, but we typically we use this, the assessment objectives more commonly in literature, and this is AO2. So in order to be successful at this task, you're now having a go at writing how the writer has used language in relation to the fact that it makes you feel sad about the boy in the basket and the man who held on. So in order to be successful, you're going to use the words the writer or find their name. You're going to select and include an appropriate quote. Now this might be a quote that is several short little words that are similar like the model, or it might be a longer quote. It might be part of one quote. and then an ellipsis and part of another sentence. It's going to use some terminology, so a language feature like a simile or a metaphor, or a word class like an adjective or a noun. You're going to explain the quote as fully as you can, trying to think about why the writer's done this, the connotations of the words, the effect of that word in that context. You're going to try and use the word because or as ever, and then you're going to try and comment on how this links back to the statement.